Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, today is Visakha Puja, which is the day in which the Buddha was born, the day he attained to Buddhahood, and the day that he entered Parinibbana. Of course, all on separate years, but always on the full moon of Visakha. And what we have been doing here at Arrow River over the years is on special days, like especially on Vesak, instead of a standard Dhamma talk, I'll tell some story from the Jatakas or the Dhammapada commentary or so forth. So I thought today a good choice would be to speak about the Buddha's seventh wasa when he taught in Tawatinsa heaven. This mostly comes from the Dhammapada commentary, and it is one of the most colorful episodes in the traditional account of the Buddha's life, full of many wondrous and supernormal events and occurrences. We can start the story a few months before the beginning of the wasa with the episode that is called the challenge of the sandalwood bowl. There was a rich man who was very skeptical of all the different spiritual teachers that were coming through the town and all proclaiming to be fully enlightened, and he was rather cynical and skeptical about all of them. So he had a very beautiful sandalwood bowl made, and he put it on the top of a high bamboo pole and said, whoever can float up into the air and take that bowl off the top of the pole, they will have proved by their supernormal power that they are truly an arahant, and I will follow their teaching, and otherwise I won't listen to anybody. So all the various heretic teachers they were greedy to get this rich layman as a follower, and they all tried to con their way into getting the bowl. They would come one after the other up to this guy and tell him, Sir, I am a fully enlightened arahant, and I could easily fly up to the top of the pole, but it would be unseemly for me to do so and make a public spectacle of myself. So I think you ought to just recognize me as a fully enlightened arahant and give me the bowl. And he sent them all on his way. And the commentary adds a particularly bit of comic flourish in the case of one of the teachers, Nagantanataputta, who often comes off in the stories as a sort of comic relief. There's some ancient rivalry there, because it's thought by scholars that Nagantanataputta represents the personage that the Jains call Mahavira, who was the founder of their sect and was a rough contemporary of the Buddha. In any case, Nagantanataputta, he went a little bit further in his attempt to get the bowl. He had some of his followers come with him to the site, and he struck a pose with one arm and one foot up in the air, like you see Superman in comic books when he's about to take off. And his followers, by a prearranged agreement, they wrestled him to the ground and said, Venerable sir, don't demean yourself before this motley crowd displaying their psychic powers. It's not worthy of you. But, it didn't work. The guy still wouldn't give him the bowl. And then it happened that Moggallana and a monk called Pindola were traveling through the area, and they heard about this bowl, and Moggallana says, either of us could easily get that bowl. Pindola, why don't you just go and fetch it down? And Pindola said, very good, Venerable Sir. And he flew through the air and acquired the bowl. And when this news reached the Buddha, he then said it's not right and proper for monks to display their psychic powers before crowds. And he laid down a Vinaya rule that monks are not supposed to claim or display supernormal psychic powers. And there's a bit of a this is a bit of a digression, but there's a what's the word? A sequel to Pindola's story. There's another episode later where the Buddha was traveling up to Tawatinsa to see the gods, and Pindola saw him flying overhead, and he flew up to join him, and the Buddha scolded him and said, I told you not to display your psychic powers anymore. And for your punishment, you're not allowed to leave this earthly plane until the end of the age. You can't enter Parinibbana. Now, this story, I don't think it's even in the commentaries. I think it's a Thai story. And it's now believed in Thailand that this Pindola is still around, still walking around, and you hear these sort of monastic urban legends. Somebody says that they heard from somebody else who heard from their brother, so and so, that they went to a meal offering at the royal palace, and there was all these ancient monks, like 80, 90 years old, and then this young monk who looks like he's about 25 walks in, briskly walks to the front of the row and sits down at the head of the line. So it's believed he's still alive, and he's been advising the kings of Thailand since the Middle Ages. So be that as it may, that's a sideline. So after the Buddha laid down this rule, the monks aren't allowed to display psychic powers, then the rival teachers, the heretics who were unable to get the bowl, they started a slander campaign saying, well, obviously the Buddha's disciples have no psychic powers, so this is an easy excuse for them. The Buddha said they can't display psychic powers, so they can always just make that for an excuse. So the Buddha then, in conversation with King Pasenadi told him about these rumors that the heretics were passing around, and the Buddha said, you can tell everybody that in 4 months' time, at the beginning of the rainy season, at the start of the Wasa, I will, at the city of Sawati, I will perform a great feat of psychic powers. And Pasenadi said, but sir, didn't you lay down a rule that monks aren't supposed to display psychic powers? And he said, yes, I did. And he said, well, how can you then do it yourself? He says, let me give you an analogy. Do you have fruit trees in your gardens, my Lord King? He says, yes, I do. And what happens to anybody who comes in and steals the fruit? Well, they're captured and punished. But you can eat the fruit anytime you like, can you not? Of course I can. Well, it's the same with this case. So the Buddha had this word spread around that he was going to perform this feat of psychic powers under the Kadampa mango at the site of the Kadampa mango tree near Sawati. And he started a long, slow progress across India towards Sawati. So preaching and teaching in the different towns and villages, timing himself to reach Sawati for the rains retreat. And the heretics who were still trying to discredit him, they sent out the word around about that they were going to perform even more wonderful feats of miracles. And they thought they would foil the Buddha. They had some of their disciples cut down every mango tree within 10 yojana radius of Sawati. So there wouldn't be any mango tree there. But when the Buddha got to Sawati, he saw a gardener with a mango, and the gardener saw the Buddha and the Nanda sitting there, and he thought, I'll make good merit. I'll offer this mango to the Buddha. So he offered the mango to the Buddha, and the gardener's name was Kadampa. So the Buddha took the mango and gave it to Ananda, and Ananda made a mango juice out of it. And the Buddha said, save the seed. And after they drank the mango juice, the Buddha said, Ananda, plant that seed in the dirt there. And he did, and it sprung up immediately and grew within a few minutes into a very big, full mango tree laden with fruit. And this was the Kadampa mango tree. So, meanwhile, the heretics had set up a pavilion at a site nearby, which they claimed they were going to use to perform their miracles. And Saka, the king of the gods, did two things. He ordered Visakha, the architect of the gods, to build a pavilion for the Buddha and his disciples, larger and more adorned and beautiful than the one of the heretics. And then he had the gods of the winds come and blow down the heretics' pavilion and scatter them like dust. So the Buddha was left uncontested in the field. And it came time for the rains retreat to begin. And the day before, the Buddha announced he was going to perform these miracles. And the day before, he had a gathering of his close disciples. And a woman named Garani, who was a female lay disciple, who was Anagami, third stage of enlightenment, she stood up and said, Lord, let me perform the miracles. It would be even more wonderful for the people to see that even your disciples can perform great miracles, let alone yourself. And the Buddha said, well, what would you do if I let you do the miracles? And she said, I would take all the earth in this, the earth element in this Jambudipa and turn it into water. And then I would turn myself into a duck and swim around in it. And the Buddha's, well, no, I don't think we're going to do that. Anybody else got suggestions? And then one after the other, they stood up with various suggestions of these advanced disciples of what they could do. A layman named Chula Anathapindika, said he would turn himself into a giant Brahman, 12 yojanas high, and clap his hands and make a huge thunderclap that would shake and roll everybody around. He said, no, I don't think we'll do that. And then a 7-year-old girl, a young female novice, a seminary, who Arahant, she said she would move Mount Sinnaru, the mountain around the edge of the world, and the Himalayas, make them smaller and put them in a row at Sawati, turn herself into a bird and fly around in between them. The Buddha said, anybody else? And a 7-year-old novice, Chunda, said that he would go up to Tawatinsa heaven and shake the trumpet tree so that the fruit and flowers rain down on earth. And finally, the Buddha turned to Moggallana, and he said, what could you do, Moggallana? Of course, Moggallana was a disciple of the Buddha who was foremost in psychic powers. So he could do just about anything. Reality was just a plaything for him. So he suggested a number of things. He said, I could shrink Mount Sinnaru to the size of a mustard seed and stick it between my teeth. Or I could roll up the whole earth like a mat and put it under my arm. Or I could turn the surface of the earth over and feed the people with the nutritious oja on the layer underneath. Now this one was kind of interesting because it references the origin story of the earth, that originally there was this oja, it's called, this nutritious foam on the surface of the sea, and now it was believed it still existed under the surface of the earth. Moggallana had once previously suggested doing the same thing during a famine. He told the Buddha that we could feed everybody by turning the earth over and giving the people the oja from under the surface. And the Buddha said, well, what would you do with the people? He says, well, I'd hold them all in the palm of my hand while I'm doing it. And finally, Moggallana said he could turn Mount Sinnaru into his umbrella shaft and the earth into the canopy and strut around with it like that. But the Buddha disallowed all these feats. Most of them seem like they would be pretty destructive of existence as it was. In any case, then the Buddha said he would himself perform great miracles. So when the time came the next day, the first thing he did was the creation of a marvelous jeweled walkway that spanned 10,000 world systems. From the peaks of Mount Sinnaru on each world system used as posts, one after the other, for 10,000 world systems. And the Devas from all these world systems assembled with the crowd of people in the air, listening to the Buddha's discourses, and he walked up and down between the world systems giving discourses for the whole of the day. And when it came time for the evening, he performed what's called the twin miracle. And there's only a couple of instances of the Buddha doing this, and it's considered the feat of supernormal power that is exclusive to a Buddha. He manifested from part of his body fire and from other parts of his body water simultaneously. And he switched it around, so the upper part was fire, lower part was water, then the left side was fire, right side was water, and all sorts of various combinations. And the reason this was considered so extraordinary is because to manifest the psychic power of fire, one has to enter fourth jhana on the fire kasina. And to manifest water, one has to enter fourth jhana on the water kasina. And only the Buddha's mind is quick enough to switch between two different kasina objects in a single mind moment at the level of fourth jhana. So he was able to manifest this apparently simultaneous, although it was alternating at the level of mind moments. And according to Abhidhamma, mind moments are very, very brief, a tiny, tiny fraction of a second. So it appears to everyone that he's manifesting water and fire simultaneously. And no one else, even the great Moggallana or the other great Arahants, no one could do such a thing, only the Buddha. Then he performed the feat of unveiling the universe. What he did was he made visible to all the humans and the devas, he made visible the whole cosmos from the highest heaven down to the lowest nethermost hell simultaneously. So everyone could look up and down and see everything in the universe at one time. Then he displayed his radiance in 6 colors, emanating rays of light from his body, 6 colored rays of light. Then he performed a feat of multiplication, where he created an image of a Buddha called a Nimitta Buddha, like an illusion or a simulation of a Buddha. And then he began multiplying that. So there was 2, then 4, then 8, then 16, until there were thousands and thousands of these Buddhas floating around in space. And some were walking, and some were sitting, and some were standing, and some were lying down. And after all this display of power, then he ascended to Tawatinsa. He determined to spend the rains retreat not on this Jampadipa earth, but on Tawatinsa among the devas. And he traveled to Tawatinsa in 2 steps. Now this is a very significant detail. The Tawatinsa is located at the peak of Mount Sindaru, which is 84,000 yojanas high. And it's surrounded by ring mountains. And the next ring mountain out is Ugandhara mountain, which is a circle around all the way around Sindaru, and it's half the height of Sindaru, so 48,000 yojanas. And the Buddha took just 2 ordinary steps, and the first one rested on the peak of Ugandhara, and the second one at the peak of Tawatinsa. And this is explained as an attribute of one of the 32 marks of the Buddha, which is that he walks with a level tread. And in his ordinary course of walking about, it means that the earth underneath him becomes instantly smooth. So any rocks or pebbles or crevices are smoothed out, and his foot rests evenly. So when he walked up to Tawatinsa, Ugandhara mountain bowed down to receive his tread, and then rose up, and Sindaru bowed down to receive his tread, and then rose up. So he just took 2 ordinary steps in a quite casual way, and he reached the peak of Tawatinsa, 84,000 yojanas above the earth. And there he spent the rains retreat teaching the devas. Osaka, the king of the gods of Tawatinsa, was concerned he wanted to pay homage and honor to the Buddha. He thought the Buddha will want to sit in my throne for preaching, and I'm happy. I'm honored that he would do that. But I'm afraid that he will look ridiculous because the throne is so vast. The gods are 3/4 of a yojana high, and the human is only uh, a couple of meters at most. So he said the Buddha will just be lost in the middle of this vast throne. And the Buddha, of course, knew what was in Visakha's mind. So to put his mind at ease, he took off his outer robe, his sangati, and unfolded it and threw it across the throne, and it filled the entire space. And then he sat on it, and he filled the entire space, just as uh, a person sitting on an ordinary seat. It, he had no problem with the size. And this is an attribute of the Buddha that occurred in another instance when the Asura Rahu, the eclipse demon, wanted to come and pay respects to the Buddha, and Rahu is said to be the largest being in the universe. It's of enormous size, and he was afraid that his great size would make the Buddha look ridiculous and be disrespectful. But he was talked into the Buddha will accept you as as a disciple. Why don't you go and see the Buddha? And he finally was talked into it and went to the Buddha's dwelling, and this is from his relative size, it was just like a tiny little dollhouse. But when he entered into it, he bowed down, crouched down to enter the door. He got in easily, and then he found himself at the foot of the Buddha's dais, having to crane his neck up to see the Buddha. So the Buddha now was seated on the throne of Saka in Tawatinsa, and Devas from 10,000 world systems, an enormous host of Devas, came to hear him preach. And he gave the seat of honor on his right side to the Deva from Tusita heaven, which is 2 heavens up from Tawatinsa, who had been his mother. And she had, in the physical human birth, she had died after giving birth to him and been reborn into Sita heaven. And now she descended to Tawatinsa to hear the Buddha preach, and he gave her the place of honor on his right side. And he spoke continually for the 4 months of the rainy season without break or let, just continuous preaching. And it said that because of the quickness of his mind and the quickness of the Devas relative to humans, that his speech was 128 times faster than ordinary human speech. And he spoke on all the mysteries of the higher mysteries of Dhamma, which became known as the Abhidhamma. And during this time, he would keep cognizant of the passage of time on Earth, which was quite different than in the Deva realm. And when it was dawn on the Earth, he would leave a Nimitta Buddha behind to preach in his place and just continue speaking. And most of the Devas were unaware that the switch had been made. Only a few of the very most advanced ones knew it. And he descended to Earth, to Lake Anotata in the Himavant, and washed his mouth and took his bowl and flew over to Uttarakuru, the northern continent, the paradisical continent that's on the other side of Sinaru from Jampadvipa. And there he walked for alms. Then he would return to Anotata and eat his day meal and wash his bowl. Would meet Sariputta there. And he would give Sariputta a brief digest of what he had taught the Devas in the previous day. And that brief digest that Sariputta received became the basis of what we call the Abhidhamma, which is a quite extensive set of teachings. But what in this traditional story, what we have in the human realm for Abhidhamma is only the merest, briefest, dumbed down version that was taught to the Devas. We only have the real synopsis here on human earth. And Sariputta taught the Abhidhamma that he learned from the Buddha. He taught it to 500 disciples. These 500 disciples had been bats at the time of Kassapa Buddha, living in a cave. And 2 monks would do walking meditation and recite passages of Abhidhamma in the cave every day. And this, the bats understood nothing of it, but something in the sounds created a seed in their being, so that they were all reborn at the time of Gautama Buddha in the city of Savatthi, and they came to be disciples of Sariputta, and they were the founders of the Abhidhamma schools. So when the rainy season began to come to an end, people, knowing that it was going to end soon, they began to wonder, when is the Buddha going to descend back to the earth? And they asked Moggallana, and he said, I'll find out. And Moggallana ascended up to Tawatinsa himself, but he did it in a completely different way. He entered into the mountain and rose up through the center of the mountain, and by a miraculous feat, he made it visible to the people. They could see him flying up through the core of the mountain to the summit. So we can see that both the Buddha and Moggallana had different means of playing with the reality to reach through the top of Tawatinsa. And Moggallana consulted with the Buddha, and the Buddha said he'll leave on Parivarana day at the end of the Vasa, and he will return down to earth at the town of Sankasa, and there he will return to the human plane. So people were assembled there to see the Buddha's descent. And the Buddha's descent from Tawatinsa at the end of the rains was done in this way. Visakha, the architect of the gods, created 3 staircases between Tawatinsa and with the foot of the Mount Sankasa on earth. The staircase on the right was made of gold, and the Devas descended on that staircase. The one on the left was silver, and the Brahmas descended on that one. And the one in the center was ruby, and the Buddha alone walked down that staircase. And various gods fanned the Buddha, including Suyama, the king of the Yama gods, and Santusita, the king of the Tusita gods. They stood beside the Buddha, fanning him as he walked. And Saka blew his horn, and the Mahabrahma held a parasol over his head. And the Buddha descended to the earth and returned to the human plane and carried on with his teaching. That particular scene, the Buddha descending the staircase with the Devas and Brahmas, is a favorite motif of art in Asia. You can see many beautiful paintings of that. It allows for a lot of color and flourishes. So this is a particularly colorful episode in the traditional story of the Buddha. There's a number of points of interest. One is the very high regard that the tradition later held the Abhidhamma, the idea that it was a teaching that was on such an elevated plane, it was given to the Devas first, and that as abstruse and as esoteric seeming as it may be, the version we have is but a very simplified version of what was given to the Devas. It also is significant. The detail about the twin miracle is made to be something very important, and it seems to us reading it, it seems like many of these other feats, the jeweled walk between 10,000 world systems and the infinite multiplication of Buddha forms, seems more amazing in a way, but the twin miracle is considered to be the summit and peak because of the detail of the quickness of the Buddha's mind, his ability to enter different jhanas very quickly in a single mind moment, which no other being is able to do. So we have in the Pali literature, we have some of these in the commentarial period. We have a few of these very colorful episodes, and this is a somewhat of the of a trend that is extrapolated even more in Mahayana literature. And we see that, for example, in the Lotus Sutra, these stories about Buddhas and Bodhisattvas manifesting in all sorts of forms and on blades of grass and so on. Another one in the Theravada literature, somewhat similar, is the commentary to the Mahasamaya Sutta, which is a sutta that talks about the Buddha preaching to Devas again. This time a great assembly of Devas come to attend on the Buddha. The sutta itself is mostly just a long list of the Devas, but in the commentary it tells a lot of details, and it also has this episode of the Nimitta Buddhas, because the Buddha in that instance he wanted to carry on his preaching with a question and answer type of deal, and he thought, who in this assembly can ask a sufficiently subtle question suitable for the occasion? And he thought there was no present who could do that. So he created the Nimitta Buddha to ask the questions. It's something that I've wondered about just in the history, in terms of the history of the literature. In the Lotus Sutra, which is a Mahayana text, there's an episode where the Buddha likewise asks who could ask such a subtle question as required to carry on this teaching, and he sees nobody who could do it. So he summons a Buddha from another world system to come and ask questions, and that would be considered completely heretical from a Theravada point of view, that there could be two Buddhas at once in the same world system. So I've wondered if this commentary to the Samaya Sutta was the original, and the Lotus Sutra was a flourish off that, or if the Lotus Sutra was the original, and the commentary to the Mahasamaya Sutta was an attempt to provide a orthodox equivalency, tell the story from an orthodox perspective. I think someone who's more versed in the history of Indian literature could maybe work that question out. So I'll stop there, but I'll stay online. Now we've got a connection. We've got a few people online. If anybody wants to ask any questions, I'll just type them into the chat. I can see the chat, so we'll carry on. Maybe having trouble with the chat now. Okay, I've got the chat going up. Sorry, I missed. I'm going to have to roll it back. My chat was frozen. I'm having trouble with this YouTube stuff. Oh, Eugene asked first, is it Toby? No, I'm sorry. Toby passed away. He's been reborn in some other existence. This is another cat. The Buddhist book 108 times normal speed. Is this number written in the canon? No, that's from the commentaries. Most of this is from the commentaries. 128 is curiously binary. Yes, Indians love playing with numbers, so I'm not surprised it'd be something like that. Yeah, we do have a program for the Visakha. We're going to have stuff happening here at 8:30. Are there arhants at this moment? We can't be sure. I think there are. I think there are some arhants still on the earth. Was it pork or was it fruit? Was it pork or was it fruit? I assume that's referring to the Buddha's last meal, and that's a indeterminate question. The Pali is translates as pig's delight. So it's generally been held that means it's some kind of pork dish, but it could also be interpreted as something pigs like to eat, and the Mahayana, who advocate vegetarianism, don't want to allow that the Buddha could possibly have eaten meat. They interpret it as truffles, but we don't really know for certain. Is it possible for Buddhists from different world systems to communicate? Was this considered anywhere in the Tipitaka? No, it was not considered as such in the Tipitaka. In the commentaries, there's a system worked out that there can only be one Buddha at a time in a field of 10,000 world systems. And later, there's a later um, layer of the, I think it's in the sub-commentary maybe, but there's a later idea that there can only be one Buddha in the whole universe at one time. So the Theravada always took the position that the Buddhas are extremely rare. This is the opposite end of the spectrum from some of the Mahayana. For example, the Zen have the saying, all beings are Buddhas from beginningless time. And in general, the Mahayana has multiplied the number of Buddhas, but the Theravada has wanted to keep it extremely rare. There's no possibility of two Buddhas being in the same world system at one time, and there's no discussion or mention of them communicating between world systems. Should we just study the suttas? Can we refer to the commentaries and sub-commentaries as well? It depends what your purpose is. The suttas, of course, should be the prime focus for Dhamma teaching. This is the actual record of the Buddha's own teaching. But the commentaries and sub-commentaries are a really rich source for all the colorful episodes and stories, and fleshes out a lot of details. And if you find that kind of material inspiring, they're an invaluable source. And a lot of them have now been translated, not entirely, but a lot of them have been translated. A good source for the stories is the Dhammapada commentaries, which has been translated as Buddhist legends. What's it all dreams someone has and remember them come true? When dreams stop, next time it starts from the moment it ended. I'm not sure what you mean by that question. Could you maybe clarify that? What is the Hindu connection to Visakha? I don't really think there is one. I don't think the Hindus celebrate Visakha. I don't think it's got anything to do with them. My cat squalling there. I think she wants to be fed. Does entering the stream feel like waking up from a nightmare? That's an interesting way of putting it. Yeah, it is like waking up. Certainly depends if your previous existence was felt to be a nightmare to the stream as well, and I don't think they would perceive their previous existence as nightmarish. Waking up from a dream, let's say. Yeah? Okay. I know some people like to listen to podcasts or talks at a 150% speed to speed it up to listen to it faster. If you had the mind of a dewa, you could speed it up 128 times and listen to a whole hour of talk in 30 seconds. Yeah, okay, so I see what you're saying about dreams now, Eugene. It's like that sometimes. It's another way of perceiving reality. I don't know if there is an explanation. Where the problem was with the. I have heard that all these streaming services are overloaded lately. So that could have some. Sadhu, goodbye. Thank you all for coming.